My name's Rich Kannwischer. It's my privilege to serve as the senior pastor of Peachtree Church in Atlanta, Georgia. And we've got a special guest for this podcast today. We've got Keith Getty with us, and Keith is well known for his leadership in writing songs and in leading worship and training worship leaders. Two of his most beloved hymns that we sing, The Power of the Cross and In Christ Alone, along with several other songs. It's just, Keith, it's great to have you. Thanks for being with us today.
Honored to be here, Richard, and great to see you again. It's been a decade, I think, since we last chatted.
It's been a long time. We haven't aged a bit, in case you're wondering.
I think we both look younger, to be honest.
Yeah, probably so. I think we're...
I think our wives feel that way.
Yeah, isn't it G.K. Chesterton? It says that we have sinned and grown old, and our Father is younger than we are. So if we're in Christ, I'm sure we're just looking younger all the time.
That's exactly it. It's the redeemed Benjamin Button in us.
Forgive me if I slip into an Irish accent. I've got some heritage on the other side of the pond in Scotland and Ireland.
Yeah,
and
typically, your surname isn't one I see often.
Right.
In Ireland,
so Rintoul. And that Kannwischer is definitely German, but Rintoul is from that side. And my great-grandfather and my great-great-grandfather were both pastors in Northern Ireland.
You're kidding me. Whereabouts?
So in Ray, Ireland, if you know where that is. I don't know where it is, but I've seen it on a map.
Okay. And what was the family name?
It's Rintoul, Rentoul, which was kind of scarring as a child because it was rent-a-tool. I got teased a lot for that.
There's a lot of places I can go that aren't helpful to a young man trying to build his identity.
Well, one of the things we're doing this year is we're talking about the Psalms, and we're talking about the critical role that music, worship, this poetry plays. Just first for you, just what role did the Psalms play in your own just kind of imagination? And
well, they have been more than any other book I've read, sung, or prayed in my life. The Psalms are ever refreshing. First of all, I think because you see on this canvas the glory of it's like it's painting the glory of God in all these different colors and pictures. But it's also, as John Calvin says, the anatomy of the human soul. Every part of the human soul is there, and so I find them extraordinarily refreshing. This morning you were speaking on the Servant King at church as a second Sunday of Advent, and you're looking at Isaiah, taking prophecy in Isaiah, and it's interesting. The Psalms do that for us because one minute we're looking at a God who is judge, the next minute a God who is shepherd. The next minute a God who is omnipresent. The next minute a God who sees everything, sees our sin, cannot live with sin, and the next minute a God who desires our praises. And so it's just all these kind of tensions and apparent contradictions just move. And so it's interesting. We've just finished the Sing hymnal. Last week we handed in 3 years of work.
Wow.
And it's interesting because as a songwriter, songwriters struggle with the Psalms because the modern worship song is a derivative of what's called the popular song, the American popular song, in the same way as the hymn is a derivative of really essentially classic English poetry. And the Psalms are Middle Eastern. So, the pop songwriter can't sort of get in this kind of mood of just progressing an emotion. Do you know what I mean? Because they flip and they move, and similarly, the British classic poetry. I mean, you've got some Scotch-Irish heritage like mine, and we sang a metrical psalm every Sunday. But of course, they don't have anywhere near the emotions of the Middle Eastern thing. So the Psalms are very refreshing because they constantly knock me out of my presuppositions. They knock me out of the boxes I want to put God in, but they give me a bigger picture of the God of the Bible. And so in that sense, they're also great art, because that's what great art does. Great art helps you see something in a bigger and a fresher way. So, they are, I can't recommend them enough. In this age where what we read and where the dominance of things like worship music and things like this, I cannot recommend it highly enough. I mean, obviously, it begins with Jesus who read or sang or recited 6 Psalms every day. Mm-hmm. So if we want to be like Jesus, well, that's the first way we can do it. And last Sunday was the first Sunday in Advent, and we were actually talking about Mary. I know it's not strictly, or maybe it should be in Advent, but we were talking about the Magnificat and just the idea that this 13-year-old, my daughter is now 13, my first redheaded daughter, she's the age that Mary would have been.
It's amazing, isn't it?
And but to actually have done the Magnificat, that's a kid who is utterly steeped in God's word, who is singing the songs of the Old Testament, who is singing the songs of the Bible. And so, there's no healthier exercise, I think, for all of us, and no greater antidote to the contradictions of our generation and the contradictions of any generation, and read the Psalms.
You spent a lot of time training worship leaders, helping to equip. Help us to understand the importance of learning to worship, and the fact that worship is a learned behavior. It's not just an experience that you show up to, but it's something that you actually do. Tell us about worship and the role of worship and kind of formation of our lives.
Well, I guess I'd probably say a few different things. I think singing itself, first of all, is a command. So we actually sing, first of all, because we're commanded to sing, not because we feel like it, not because we like to sing, or not because we like to sing in a certain style, or certainly not because we're in the mood to sing. We're all commanded to sing. So if you are a worship leader or an organist, the first job you need to know is you're not leading your choir. Similarly to the worship leader, you're not leading the people in the front 3 rows who put their hands up at the end, in the middle of the first chorus. Do you know what I mean? You're leading everybody. We're all commanded to sing. And therefore not to sing is a sin. And it's interesting that people often say, where's the best singing churches? And it's inevitably the churches where the senior pastor is most committed to singing, teaching singing, modeling singing, being involved in the hymns, getting stuck in themselves. It doesn't matter their skill level. They just have to be passionately involved. And that works down the levels. So if you go to the family unit, what families sing the best? The families where the dad sings. So in other words, if dads aren't actively engaged, if senior pastors aren't actively engaged, so will follow the congregation and the family. But we sing, first of all, because we're commanded. It is not why we listen to our favorite artist. It is not why we listen to our favorite radio station. The second thing is we're created to sing. God has created us. If those of us good Presbyterians like us know that God is sovereign. And so if he gave my wife a beautiful voice that thousands of people want to listen to, and he gave me a voice that my kids don't even want to listen to when I'm in the shower, that's because he's sovereign and he decided, but he still created us to sing. But the encouragement for that, for worship leaders, is that, God loves beautiful things. God creates beautiful things. So the work we spend preparing our worship services, whether it's the architecture of the structure of the service, whether it's practicing our musical instruments, whether it's helping the choir sing well, these things are valuable. Do you know what I mean? Because we're created in God's image. But most of all, we sing because of Christ. We sing because Christ has compelled us to sing. And Psalm 24 asks the question, doesn't it? Who may go up to the hill of the Lord? Who will stand in his holy place? And the answer is only him with clean hands and a pure heart. And I can only speak for Irish people and musicians, but there certainly isn't one person with clean hands or a pure heart among the Irish or among the musical community. And I suspect with anybody that breathes. And so we ultimately sing because the Lord Jesus has made a way for us. He's brought us to the cross and has brought us through his resurrection, through coming to earth as a child, being dying, living, dying, being rising from the dead, and ascending. That we have this wonderful hope. So that's why we sing. I
even love the image of when I got to seminary and I read the Bible for the first time systematically, I was amazed at realizing that the opening chapter of the Bible was a song. That literally all of creation is a response to the epic poetry and song of creation. And so it goes all the way back to the very beginning. There are different kinds of songs that do different purposes. And one of my favorites of the songs that you've helped to write is God of Every Grace.
Oh,
and
wow.
I remember you saying somewhere along the line that you didn't think there was enough songs out there that tapped into lament.
Yeah.
And a lot of the Psalms are about praise, but a lot of them are about lament. Can you talk about that song, God of Every Grace?
Sure. So God of Every Grace was written our kids go to we had to choose between sending our kids to Covenant School or St. Paul's, a Christian academy across the street. They're 801 yards from each other, and we went to St. Paul's Christian Academy, and of course, there was the tragedy at Covenant School. So and Chad and his families and all those folks, just it's a horrendous situation, and. But like we were going to school every day, and the moms were just sitting on the walls, just leaving their kids off, just crying and sobbing. And Kristen decided to write "God of Every Grace" with Brian Fowler. I came in just to straighten the music out of it. It was mostly Kristen and Brian Fowler in that one. So that was room for lament, and Kristen wrote a stunning lyric on it. And it's so I'm so thankful. But it's interesting because part of how I wouldn't even say the under 30s, but certainly the 20s to 50s, how they digest worship today is from Christian radio, which is a very dangerous thing. And those movements, because Christian radio is a perfectly valid genre, but its genre is not work. Its job is to help, as a business, is to help primarily women who are in their early 30s or mid 50s feel a little bit better for the day ahead. And I mean, they have two characters they aim it for. Mm-hmm. And that's the business. Guys sit around a boardroom, 8 of them, and they go, what in 2 minutes, 54 seconds can allow those two communities who are 70% of the listening audience, get pepped up for the day? And that's not what the Psalms are doing. Because so the laments of the Psalms, because they won't work on Christian radio, are not part of the kind of the easy to grab sound that a worship leader will pick in a church service. So again, it's another warning for anybody who's a worship leader, and even more for senior pastors, to take a lead in your services and help educate your congregation. If left to just what is their natural desires, they're not going to go there. And so the Psalms, of course, 50 of the Psalms are laments. Most noticeably, 48 of them have some form of resolution, or some would say 48 and a half of some form of resolution, if only to say that He is God and we are not, and so and a sense of rest or contentment in that, and but that's hugely important. But so I would say, if you're looking for a practical tip on bringing the Psalms of Lament into your church services, into your family devotion, or just your family prayers with your kids, or into your own worship life, I usually suggest doing it, having a multi-pronged attack. So reading the Psalms of Lament, reading them just for being read. Secondly, read them as calls and response, which helps people. Thirdly, encouraging people who are saying the prayers to incorporate them into prayers. Use them, try and think outside of what in our culture needs lament. So today, do we have to be lamenting for Syria? Do we have to, this Christmas, how do we feel about immigrants? How do we feel about bereavement? How do we feel about the issues in our own communities at this point? And then trying to apply the Psalms directly to that, because they're such a beautiful salve in those. And then also singing them. But singing them is hard because, because it's just hard. We're so pepped up about worship is about making us feel good. Like the radio songs do. That I think we have to begin a re-education. And it's when so many of my friends that I like play golf with and stuff like that are not Christian, and or the guys that I walk with in the morning, I'm the only Christian in the whole group, and a lot of them think that Christianity is shallow, slightly unintelligent answers to difficult questions. And if you examine our worship music as a sole response to the God of the universe and the reality of the human plight, they're right. They're just right. It's not good enough.
I think that the average American Christian expression today is in church a mile wide and an inch deep. And we have dumbed down American Christianity to a hatch, match, and dispatch gospel. And it is the kind of thing where it is almost treated like heavenly insurance, as opposed to the expansive nature of the reality and the presence of God, inviting us into His grace and His goodness. I remember a good friend, Mark one time told me that he had the assumption that being a Christian made you more small-minded. And then his heart exploded as he started reading passages of the poetry, like the Psalms and the songs, and realizing this is an expansive view of the universe and of the reality of God's kingdom.
And that there's a couple of things in that's interesting. So I'm actually doing the Proverbs this year. My oldest daughter, we do the same devotions. We do Tim Keller's coming on the Proverbs. So read them separately, and average about twice a week, we get to do it together, and it's just the coolest thing. We do it Sunday mornings and usually Wednesday mornings. And so we'll just go and it takes 3 minutes to read and we discuss it. So about a week and a half ago, maybe 2 weeks ago, it got to the section on justice. So my daughter, she doesn't go to Christian school or anything like that. She goes to a not Christian school, and a very good, very, very good school, but it's certainly not Christian. And but she goes, Dad, we went through it, and we talked about her, and she goes, Dad, she goes, I don't think any of my friends at school would think Christianity has anything to do with justice. So it was the first time it had ever dawned on her. But she always knew Christianity had something to do with it, but she just went, when my friends at school think about Christianity, they don't think of us as having anything to do with justice. Well, what is justification without an outworking of justice in every part of life?
Yeah.
And so that's why this sort of stuff is so important, because it's all through the Psalms. Mm-hmm. And the other couple of things I would say as artists, one of the things is great art slows us down. Like my wife and I will be in New York Monday week, and then the next morning we're all going to get up, we're going to go for bagels with the girls, and then we're going to go for a walk to the Met, just to slow down for an hour. Because you can't look at those paintings fast. Yeah. If you did, you're an idiot. Do you know what I mean? But you can't look at them and have a profound experience. It just slows you down. Poetry. Malcolm Guite, who's going to be at the New York show.
Oh, fantastic.
He says poetry slows you down. It slows you down and takes you out of the speed of life and the speed of your problems and makes you think, because you can't just digest it fast. Great art you can. You can't do that with symphonies. You can't do that with great movies. You can't do that with great cuisine.
No, you cannot. You have to savor it. Yeah.
So it's slow. So they slow you down, which is a wonderful thing. And the third thing I would say is we really need. One of the saddest things about us avoiding the laments is other parts of culture haven't avoided the laments. Do you know what I mean? So in our services, we're not praying them, we're not reading them, we're not singing them. And I said 48 and a half of the 50 laments resolve. Well, the one that definitely doesn't resolve is 88.
Yeah. Darkness is my closest friend.
I believe Paul Simon's paid a couple of mortgages off with that one. Do you know what I mean? And so, but that's the joke of it. Do you know what I mean? That's the joke of it. He took the entire thing from the Psalm, from Psalm 88. Yeah. And he wrote a song about it. And like I have a friend, he's a friend, we're colleagues. We spent time together, we worked in a couple of broadcasts together. But he became a very, very wealthy man writing songs and with a very niche audience. And what he did was he says, I know in my show a third of the people are hurting. So he says, I never go 20 minutes without stopping. And then I tell an emotional story and do a slow song. But he did it purely algorithmically to sell merchandise.
Wow.
And we as Christians are trying to bring people into church and trying to pep them up and make them feel good and pretend none of that's happening. Do you know what I mean? You see the conflict? You know,
absolutely. I remember Eugene Peterson one time talking about how many of our modern worship expressions are more like the prophets of Baal dancing before the altar in First Kings than it is more about praying to the God of Abraham and Isaac and Jacob in utter trust. Yeah. And we don't have to dance around. We're not trying to engineer an experience. We're trying to be faithful to the God who has given us his faithful love. Yeah. And so, yes, there are lots of trappings around us when it comes to worship. All right, I'm not going to ask you if you have a favorite child, but I am going to ask you, and you can't pick a song that you've written.
I always have a favorite child, but it's always a different one.
It rotates, back and forth for me. But and you can't pick one of the songs that you've written.
Yeah.
But do you have a favorite song or so that you love that takes you into worship? What's a song, a poem that really does that for you?
Well, it changes every day. It changes every day.
Well, just give us an example of one that.
Bro, we're at Christmas season at the minute. Luckily we're opening tonight's our Christmas show. The first half's like an Irish Christmas party. It's usually done in sort of general hall. So there's a majority of Christian, but there's plenty of people who aren't Christian go. So the first half's like an Irish Christmas party, and the second half is a 60-minute reduction of the 9 lessons and carols. So we're getting to open it with Once in All David City, which is the correct way to do it for you guys because you've got an educated congregation. But most places we're opening at the minute with Let All Mortal Flesh Keep Silent, and with Fear and Trembling.
Yeah.
Ponder nothing earthly minded, but with blessing in his hand, Christ our God to us descended, our full homage to demand. I think it was Greek originally from the 3rd century. But
it's so old.
I love
right?
the idea. Yeah. I love that these things just get passed on. And I think this is another reason why I encourage people involved in worship today to go to the Psalms, go to liturgies, and also go to the hymns that last, because just from a pastoral reason, they're so much more pastorally valuable. I remember this isn't a psalm, but Kristen does a hymn of the month with our girls, and we're not like this kind of family with us. Only these homeschool families that all their kids at 7 have memorized Leviticus and they've translated the Bible into 2 languages and stuff. We're all emotional and erratic.
Do you make them sit around and listen to Kristen's reading of the Bible just so they push play?
And then they have to sing it exactly like their mom and wear her clothes. No, so we just at nighttime, Kristen basically pick a hymn for the month and camp on it. So some of the time she'll talk about it, but most of the time we just play it before they go to sleep at night or play it on the way to school. But always by the end of the month they've got it in their head and they know it for the rest of their life, and it's an investment.
Yeah.
If we're going to drive them to horse riding and back, if we're going to drive them to cello lessons and back and choir practices and theater practice and all their extracurricular school stuff, we'd better be writing these truths of God in their hearts. And the best way to do that is songs. I'm sorry to say this to somebody who crafts sermons, but songs write it in their hearts better.
Absolutely.
They engrave it better.
I have no illusions about that.
They engrave it deeper. And but anyway, we were doing "Be Thou My Vision," and the girls got into the car and they started singing it one morning because she said,
"Good Irish song, too."
Yeah, I know. A derivative of St. Patrick's breastplate, and but so they sang "Be Thou My Vision, O Lord of my heart," and I thought that is beautiful. Just thinking that would be their prayer, and then they were singing "Be Thou My Wisdom," and one of them was holding her iPad in the back seat, and I thought, there's an image. She's singing "Be Thou My Wisdom," holding on their way to school to learn who knows what. And holding an iPad, which has got, which is a disaster. I mean, now, they say about parenting today as opposed to when we were growing up, parenting when we were growing up was 100% physical. It's now 10% physical, 90% digital. And I think that's true. And so, but be thou my wisdom, thou my true word. There's not a lot, there is no, as far as I can tell, no news station left in the West that talks in a way of true word. In the verse 3, be thou my battle shield, sword for the fight. Well, when you're a father of 4 daughters, you're dreading a certain day, coming closer all the time. And I want them to say, when they leave me, especially when they leave me, I don't see them anymore. I want them to say, be thou my battle shield, sword for the fight. Be thou my dignity, thou my delight, thou my soul's shelter. Then verse 4 goes, rich as I heed not, nor man's own ears. Well, they're all going to have different levels of success.
Yeah.
And I hope that they say, thou mine inheritance, not always. And then verse 5, high King of heaven, after victory won, they will all one day be sick, be ill, and prepare for death. And all of us are preparing for death. Now, the point I'm making with that very long-winded story is when I was going to youth events in Belfast as a teenage guy, primarily to get girlfriends, but also to listen to some Christian stuff, we sang a song called Lord, I Want to See You. Mm-hmm. Well, nobody sings Lord, I Want to See You anymore.
Right.
Whereas Be Thou My Vision is an investment they have for their life. So if you can get your kids somehow to read, chant, responsibly read, pray, sing the Psalms, the great hymns of the faith, and the liturgies that come out of the Psalms, you're creating something for them that they have for the rest of their life. It's like There's a brilliant story about a church potluck, where a little smart-mouthed kid runs over to the pastor in front of all the other kids and goes, "Pastor, why is it you always say, the grass withers, the flowers fade, but the word of the Lord dwells forever?" And he goes, "That's why." And he walks off.
Exactly.
So that's what I want with the Psalms and the hymns and the liturgies they sing.
Well, and that's the goal, the dream. So my holy discontent with the typical daily devotional is that it's non-repetitive. Yeah. Meaning you read. Let's assume that you're among the 1% who get up and read a devotional every day to try to calibrate your thought. But you read something and then you move on, and you've forgotten what you read yesterday and the day before, which is why every single week we're inviting people to read, so the first one, from Psalm 90, Lord, you have been our dwelling place throughout all generations. Say that in the morning, say that in the evening, say that in the middle of your day, and to do that for a week. And that maybe for me anyway, maybe after a week of saying that 3 times a day and praying that 3 times a day for a week, maybe it'll settle in. Mm-hmm. But it takes that kind of spade work to get it deep enough to be able to impact our soul. And so, Keith, thank you so much for helping us to kick off this conversation and to be with us. And we love just the fact that we're getting to be a part a little bit of your tour, as well as the opportunity of what you guys are bringing to share and worship and in music with others.
Well, thank you for inviting a poor Irish guy onto a Buckhead podcast. I mean, this is I presume this is going to be available in English as well.
Yeah, yes, we will. We'll do it with subtitles for sure. We'll make sure that those of you can understand. That's good. Well, all right. Keith, thank you so much.
All right.
Thank you so much for joining us for our Peachtree podcast and our season of Dwell, where we're talking about what does it mean for God to dwell with us and for us to be able to dwell with God through these ancient prayers and being able to discover God's presence anew this year. For more information, go to our website at peachtreechurch.com/dwell.